This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
All right, we'll call to order the Easthampton Aquifer Protection Committee on February 25th, and the time is 3:10. Introductions. I'm Mike Serwick. I'm chairman.
Bob Newton.
Hi, I'm Rachel Phillips.
I will say that I'm a resident of Easthampton, and I'm a retired professor from Smith College, and I, among other things, taught a groundwater course.
And he's very knowledgeable about the ecology of Easthampton. Whereas I am a sharer of information and not as knowledgeable about ecology. And Mike worked for the water department for many, many years until he retired very recently.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Rachel.
Pleasure.
First order is public speak. I'll start, I guess. Okay.
Hi, I'm Mike Tousnick. I live on Hendrick Street. I was involved early on when Professor Newton made an offer to take a look at our aquifer. Fast forward, we ended up
What year was that, Mike?
87, maybe.
A long time ago.
Yeah. And so I have a fairly good knowledge of the aquifer, and I'm here today to raise an alarm about a proposed zoning amendment here in the community. When I first heard about it, it's a housing, it's driven as a housing meeting, and zone changes to increase housing production. And that didn't really bother me very much until I got into the nuts and bolts of it. So it turns out, based on the research I've done on the city's website, that apparently this zoning change wasn't run by anyone except the housing group and now the city council. I couldn't find any minutes or agendas for the housing group for the last year. So I don't know for a fact that it didn't get moved around in the community. Maybe you guys were aware of it ahead of this. I'll simplify my remarks because I tend to go on. Essentially, the proposal would triple the density in the aquifer recharge area and double the density in the secondary area that feeds the recharge. So what are our R40 and R80 zones would revert back to the problems that we had when the HUD development was put in place, which drove the problems with our aquifer. I'm not a foe of housing, but I am a foe of doing things deliberately to damage the water supply. I think this is a horrible idea, and I do urge the committee to get a look at it and come up with an opinion and express that opinion to the city council. When I speak to the councilors, I'm going to suggest they send this back to the administration for a proper review. In most communities, major zoning overhaul is reviewed internally by all of the groups, including yours, that might be affected by it. In this case, I don't believe any of that review is done. It's a dangerous proposal from the point of view of the aquifer.
Do you know what the timetable is, Mike?
As far as I know, it's just in front of the city council committee at this point, and there is no timetable on when they might vote it. And I believe the meeting that was scheduled for tonight has been canceled because they weren't able to post it in time. So I'm not aware of when the next meeting will be. It was scheduled for 6 today, but I didn't find it on the city's website. So.
And you said it would triple density in which?
The recharge area.
But you also doubled.
The R40. So it's zoning. So instead of using the aquifer terms, I'll use the zoning terms. In the R40 district, which was created to map, to essentially overlay the area where the aquifer is. the primary recharge. And then the R80 was on the slopes that feed that primary recharge.
So with triple density in the
So it triples the
R40.
density, it brings it back to R15. 15,000 square foot lots instead of 40,000 square foot.
So it'd be
lots.
R40 to R15
And it brings the R80 to R40.
and brings R8, and that's the double density to R40. Okay. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll just stand up. So we can- I'm Connie Dunham. I'm actually a city councilor, and I'm the chair of the ordinance committee. And so so there's no confusion about anything. This is just the first step. So it came to city council and city council sent it to the ordinance committee. And then once the ordinance committee reviews it, it will go to the planning board. And then at that point, everyone else will have the opportunity to weigh in and give their feedback and things of that nature, right? So no one is going to be left out of the process. This is just the first step, because this is the way that the planning board asked, or not the planning board, originally we were told to do this, that it should come to the ordinance committee first. We should review it to minimize the amount of back and forth with the planning department, so we can clear up and clean up as much as we possibly can before it goes to the planning board. In no way is this going to supersede anything that is established by the Aquifer protection. None of that. All of those are going to be happening in conversation. I think it's really an opportunity to think about our zoning and to maximize in the ways that we can available space for housing. If they're not going to increase those things, right? Housing in those particular spaces, it's a conversation, and it's not going to impede or inhibit or change the aquifer protection.
That's not what it
really-
says.
Okay, I'm telling you that that's the conversation that has been had, and then we're not going to change those particular things, right? These are two separate things that overlap, and so to protect the
I'm
aquifer,
sorry,
those
this
things.
is confusing, but
Mhm.
the changes come when stuff is built and it automatically changes it. It's not about you or people just changing the water. You're talking about changing the zoning. The zone, but that has nothing to do with anything. When you put more density of people, it changes how the water is affected.
Sure, absolutely. And so what I'm saying is we're not going to change those particular things, right? So
That's
there
not
are
up
various.
to you, though. It's not about you changing. It's confusing the way you're
So the
saying it.
committee-
It's a byproduct of putting people there.
Right, so what I'm saying is that we're not going to, that's not going, so if there's a protection plan that's in place, then we're not going to change that, right? So we're not going to,
I'm sorry, I think the issue is being confused because you're talking about rezoning it. So inherently, you're talking about changing it.
right, so if this particular area or this particular space is of a concern, then that zoning is not going to change.
So you're saying that if it was under advisement from the Aquifer Protection Committee, say, hey, it's really gonna affect the water, what you're saying is you're not gonna do it.
Yeah, so if this is protected space,
Gonna stay that way.
then it's gonna stay that way.
So you're saying this whole conversation is moot if it's just said, no, you can't build there because it affects the aquifer.
I think we're looking at a variety of different areas that we're thinking about
Okay,
private property and things like that. So yes, that's what I'm saying. Okay. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. This is just the beginning like I said, this is just the beginning conversation of this, right? Because a lot of these things are not, what's the word I'm looking for? They're not standard lot sizes and things like that. And so we're looking at the committee, right? Looking at a variety of different things to be able to kind of address these various things. Right? Does that make sense? Yeah,
Oh, you know, stuff that's posted online, and there's a lot of.
absolutely. Totally, totally understandable.
What else?
Happy to speak. I live on Overwood Drive. So this discussion has actually been happening in the Fair Housing Commission for a little over a year. So it's not the beginning of the conversation. Some of the proposals really will increase the density if they're approved. And the density in the city has already been increased significantly, with more density increases already planned. So I think looking at the zoning, potential zoning changes in sort of the totality of what's going on in the city, plus some of the extra building that's occurring in some of our neighboring towns that also impact the aquifer. I don't know when your next meeting is going to be, but I'm really concerned about the battery storage facility that's going to be placed next to or on the aquifer in Westfield. And I was disappointed that that wasn't on today's discussion. So,
Well, it's in Westfield.
yes, but it's sitting on our aquifer. And the state is trying to override the city's opposition to it. So,
So you said things have already changed.
yes,
Has anything happened in the recharge area of the aquifer?
not currently, no. So that's what I wanted to.
Are you on the Fair Housing Committee?
I sit in on a lot of those meetings.
So you just sit in on the meetings. And by the way, Mike Tosnick said it only happened, the discussion in the Fair Housing Committee and nowhere else. I think he said it's the only place where the
Correct.
conversation has
Developers
been
were
happening.
invited to.
So it might be happening for a year, but that's the only place. Hi,
Sorry, I was on a call.
I'm good.
Allison, city planner. I don't know if you want me to pop in.
do you
Sure.
want to, Allison? Do you feel like it?
Yeah, I have a minute if that's okay. Sorry to interrupt y'all.
Hi, Allison.
I had a meeting before. So.
All right. Anybody else, public speak?
I will, go ahead. My name is Mariella Deluzio. I live on Mineral Street in Easthampton. Just some of our background, I'm a chemist. I own a water testing laboratory. For over 40 years, I've been doing a lot of groundwater testing, especially drinking water analysis and water testing for public water supplies. And so I been reading the zoning thing, and I didn't even know we had an aquifer protection committee. And as I read the section in the new zoning proposal on page 39 is the Aquifer Protection District, and it referred to the creation of an Aquifer Protection District, and it referred to section 7.052K. And I could not find this document, and I would be interested in having it.
7.052K.
Yeah, in the Aquifer Protection District. It's a creation of the Aquifer Protection District. And on page 39, it refers to that section of this district. And I don't know if that's a map or if that's an actual plan of some sort.
It's in the zoning bylaw.
I'd be interested in being able to see that. The two paragraphs written in the report regarding the aquifer protection seem really inadequate, considering the development on or near the Barnes Aquifer. I mean, as you know, the only public drinking water supply for Easthampton, and as stated in the report, there is no feasible economic alternative water supply for Easthampton. The zoning changes will allow for high density building, and it's not clear to me how this will be applied in these environmentally sensitive areas. Obviously, before I heard Ms. Dunham speak, but I'm still confused about that. I mean, the report specifically mentions the development in R40 and R80 districts, and it mentions that the Aquifer Protection District will be applied there, but there's no detail on that. I'm really concerned about that. It states in these two paragraphs that it'll prevent harmful activities such as commercial use, industrial use, and storage of hazardous chemicals. But I don't see other protection concerns such as the protection of the groundwater recharge areas and the limiting of impervious surfaces. Pervious surfaces have a major effect on recharge areas and the environment in general. In addition, there are concerns about the removal of natural vegetation, which can lower rainwater infiltration rates. The high density developments usually have a major impact and increase on stormwater runoff. And I think these are important factors that don't seem to be addressed in these recommendations at all.
Do you want to leave your notes with me when you're done?
A little better.
Why don't you? Okay, that'd be great.
has the recharge area, I think part of my question got answered today, but has the recharge area for the Barnes Aquifer been identified? And does it expand beyond the R40 and R80 areas? You probably already know this, but is it protected by the Aquifer Protection District? So in the rush to provide more housing, and I'm not against more housing, but it seems hard, it seems that the hard-found environmental protections that we've put in place over the years are not a concern of not being enforced here. And I've seen that in other places in town. And an example of that is the so-called Tasty Top development, where high density development is being allowed 20 feet from a pristine river and very high impervious surface area. And this will have a major impact. The runoff from that will have a major impact on the river. So I don't really have a lot of insurances here from what I read that this aquifer is going to be properly protected. And so I ask you not to support what's written so far. Thank you.
I'm going to give you an email to send this.
Sure.
You an email to me.
Okay. Well, I can get it at the end.
Okay, great.
Oh, and also too, I was concerned about the Westfield battery implications. And I think you should have been asked for your input, even though it's not in Easthampton, but we're directly impacted.
It's on the Barnes Aquifer.
Yeah.
Baypack is dead.
Yeah.
It's what?
This Baypack is dead.
There was a committee comprised of the 5 towns on the aquifer that took that, but it doesn't exist and it hasn't existed for a while. So it's. Yes, thank you. Patty Gambrini, 20 Sheldon Avenue in Easthampton. And I should also disclose that I worked with Bob and Mike on the Barnes Aquifer Committee. I facilitated in my role at the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. And someone contacted me this weekend to alert me to this issue. And I think the desire to increase density for housing is a noble one. I think we need more housing. Everybody understands the urgency of that. But I also think there is a precious reservoir underneath our feet here in this town, and we need to do all we can to be protective of it. When I look at what happens in the plains, I look at my neighbors where I live, and there's so much lawn chemical being spread. I don't think residential use is something we want to, increase density on the aquifer. I looked back in some of the content that I have and just remembered all these things. The Aquifer Protection Overlay District in the zoning bylaw has not been updated in years. And part of what was holding the city back was there's this discussion with Mass DEP, you both probably remember this, over the extension of the zone 2 to the northern part of the city where there's a clay defining layer. The city's had a lot of industry there. And so it held the city back from updating the bylaw. I think that needs to be resolved somehow with Mass DEP so that you can update it and get those protections in place because it's outdated. And I think, going in and making this one change as is proposed to take the multi-family prohibition out and allow it over the aquifer, like that, it makes no sense. And I think there needs to be some serious work in going into that bylaw, really understanding sort of, figuring out that discussion with Mass DEP and then moving forward with recommendations that were made way back in 2007. So that's what I've been digging up because I knew it was out there, but I didn't remember it exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I just want to follow up a little bit.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, let Michael go.
Anyone? No?
No, all right.
So I've had some social media interaction with the author of the person who says he's the author of the document. There seems to be a clear disconnect between the aquifer, what the aquifer overlay district is for and what density control is for. there seems to be a belief that the Aquifer Overlay District is the only thing that's protecting the aquifer. Whereas density is probably more, at least as important as the kinds of uses. And so I think, you know, I believe that it's an honest mistake, not understanding the subject, not seeking information before writing the proposal. But the belief that the Aquifer Overlay is the thing we're not going to touch, that doesn't fix any of the bad things about this proposal.
Go ahead.
Joy Winnie, I was a city councilor. I was a city councilor when Patty and Mike and we were all working years, I'm going to say years, on protecting the aquifer in Easthampton, to the point where when we did do the rezoning for the R80 and the R40, I put my own personal property into a non-conforming property to make it an R40 to protect the aquifer. We worked on this for years, and for the committee to come through and just say, well, you know, to hell with the research, to hell with all of the work that Michael and Patty and numerous other people did, and Mr. Newton, it terrifies me, because I'm seeing the growth in Easthampton, and again, like everybody else, I have nothing against new growth. However, it needs to be smart growth. And for us to give up smart growth for our water supply, that's a no-go. And everybody should feel that way. This is, as reported, our only source of water. We don't get a second chance at this. So, you know, we need to be proactive. That's why we're here today. That's why we're speaking up. This should have been vetted out with numerous people before it ever went to city council, like it did back when I was on the city council. Nothing came before us unless it was fully vetted, fully outlaid through everybody, including the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. Nothing came before the city council before it was fully vetted, fully laid out. All of the question marks were, you know, taken care of to the point where we were fully understanding what the impact was for protecting our water. That's all I have to say, and we will be watching this carefully. I myself, my husband, we have a lot at stake of this too. We've given up a lot of our rights to protect our water. Thank you, Patty.
Anybody else?
I just want to talk about the procedure of like a concern like the aquifer. In like when they did the plans for the Tasty Top project, they kept on pushing and go to a different meeting, and certain people weren't there until things got passed. And now there's a wildlife corridor that's going to be blocked by the Tasty Top project. And I've been living in Easthampton for 48 years, or 50 years I've been living here.
What's your name?
Steve Natupski.
I see. You've been living here for almost 50 years. Please go
For
on.
almost 50 years, yes. I've been living here for 50 years, but I bought my property in 77 maybe. Like 40 years ago, we used to get some horrific rain. And like, I haven't seen water like that since then. And like, I think lots of the building being done in Easthampton is gonna like show some serious trouble when that water comes back, because it's gonna, because time waits for nobody.
For sure.
Thank you.
And everybody? Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for the input. I mean, at this point, like I said, I haven't had a chance to read through the whole report. We'll definitely discuss this and get some recommendations for the ordinance subcommittee, I think. Bob, you have anything to say?
Well, I have not read it either. So I don't have much to say because I don't really know what it is, but I do think that if you're concerned about whether we are here to protect the aquifer, you can be assured that we are. That we will look very carefully, and I have done a lot of mapping in the area. I know where the recharge areas are. So I think we understand the issues, and I think we'll just have to see how things go. You know, I think that the recharge issue is a really critical issue. And you know, we have a history of having water quality issues in our aquifer, but having enough water is a whole different problem. And that is not something that's going to be easily dealt with. And do you know the status of swimming?
That was never,
Is it dead?
no.
This is the sustainable water management issue. You must know.
Yeah, I know a little bit. So Easthampton's in the middle of renewing its permit.
So what this is it's a permit that determines how much water we can pump from the aquifer. And it's, you know, Mike will tell you that if there's a lot of water there, we can pump a lot of water. But the state's going to say, well, you can't pump it because when you pump that much, you draw down the water in the streams and that affects the fish and all these other things. So you need to be doing these things to protect recharge.
Mhm.
So I think that's an issue that we will need to address with regard to this whole policy. You know, it's not just that we will run out of water. It's going to be the state's going to say you can't pump it. So I think there are a lot of issues that probably need to be.
Do we already
Okay.
come up to that when we're told we can't pump anymore? Right now, we talked about this.
Well, I mean, I don't want to go into swimming because I have a lot of issues with it, but it is, we are,
We talked about this, but we're confronted by this already.
we are targeted because our well field is next to Broad Brook.
Mhm.
So when we pump hard, we pull water out of Broad Brook.
Well, Broad Brook reflects the surface of the aquifer
Mhm.
in many instances.
And this is
And so
already,
in parts of it, yes. In other parts, maybe not.
Palmore Street.
Well, Pomeroy Street, yeah, that's total recharge area.
Mhm.
But as you go down, and Patty, did you brought up the zone 2 thing? Oh, yeah. So cause you know, there's like the Maloney well, which is in the north end of town and it's tapping the aquifer, but it's protected by clay. And so do you treat that the same as other areas which are not protected by clay? And I think that's what Patty was referring to. And it is an issue that really needs to be addressed. Exactly right.
One of my concerns, if I could ask a question, I'm sorry. It seems to me that a lot of the state zoning and fair housing and affordable housing issues that are coming out of Boston give permission to override local zoning and local issues. How much power do you really have over something like that? Because in the Tasty Top thing, I saw no consideration for environmental issues at all.
We have no power at all. We are purely an advisory body. So what we're able to do is make a recommendation. And they can ignore it.
Yeah, so you know, that
But
doesn't give
I
a
would,
lot of.
having said that, I think, and again, Patty was a leader in BayPAC, which was the Barnes Aquifer Protection Advisory Committee, but ended up having a lot of impact.
Mhm.
So I think that it's a challenge. We don't have any real authority, but I think in the right circumstance, you can still have a big effect. And we had such a great effect that they got rid of us.
Do you need to bring that back?
If I may, that would take some upper level elected officials to get together to decide that needs to happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we
And I
won't
don't,
want that.
and I don't know that you have that.
No.
Well, it has to come from the state legislature. I think that's what
Yeah.
happened. BayPAC came from the state legislature. Isn't that true?
It was a memorandum of agreement between municipalities, and municipalities are empowered to agree under state law, but it has a term of 25 years.
Ah.
And that's what happened. We exceeded that
And
25
if the,
years.
if the mayors involved today don't see it as an issue, then they don't perpetuate it.
Right. It's chief electeds who need to sign on.
So that becomes an election issue this year.
But wouldn't these protecting the aquifer also be a public health issue? And wouldn't public health have authority to stop some damage, environmental damage to our drinking water supply?
I mean, what you say is true with the history of how we deal with these issues is it's after the impact on public health that we react. It's not proactive.
And Mike, if I may just make one more statement. Sure. The other thing that I think we all need to be aware of is the state has said that accessory dwellings are legal everywhere.
Right.
So we're already looking at more development in the R40 and R80 district without changing the zoning, because every single family house out there can have a tiny house
Right.
or or an addition up to 900, I think it's 900 square feet, by right, without making any changes. So we're already seeing a density impact that's caused by a state law that we're not prepared to mitigate in any way. And now we have a proposal to just add on to that.
So do we have documentation of what has been implemented to date in the recharge area? I mean,
What kind of,
so if someone does one of those 900 square foot additions, where does that information lie right now?
Assessors.
so it wouldn't have happened yet. I don't believe any, you would check with the building department for building permits, obviously, because that has to be the first step. And then if it's completed, the assessor will have records of it. But this state law change is recent, and I don't know that there's been any applications for it. There've been some tiny houses built in town, under our existing zoning, but now this new state law essentially allows it by right everywhere.
So I can weigh in too. if you'd like.
Yes.
So we have an existing accessory dwelling unit zoning ordinance, which does allow them in quite a few locations. The state law went into effect February 3rd, I believe. And yes, in most cases, the building department, building permit records, as well as assessors after it's built, would be the location for that information. There have been applications already since February 3rd under the new state law, because it is more permissive than what we currently have in the zoning ordinance, but it is still very new. So there's more that will be coming. I assume.
So it's really only 3 weeks old.
Yeah, well, so they released the, they passed the
There was a
legislation.
6-month.
Yeah, they passed the legislation over the summer and then they released draft regulations, in the fall, but it didn't go into effect until February 3rd.
And does the city have any survey of impermeable surface areas?
It's a good question. I'm not sure if we have like a town-wide mapping of impervious.
I think with the stormwater permit.
We have to do that,
Yeah.
yeah. So for the MS4, you mean? Yeah, so it's possible. I don't know how often they do that. It's usually based upon like satellite imagery and
Yeah,
data.
Air photos.
Yeah. I haven't seen it myself, but presumably, yes, it does exist.
I was gonna say, I did one in the 80s, I think, or maybe the 90s, or my students did, in which we used the air photos and we did a density analysis from that. It'd be interesting to see if it's changed and how much it's changed.
Yeah, Yeah, and you'd have to set a time period for comparison, but I'm sure it'll be done. I do want to add though that I'm not sure that the state's regulation and law relative to the accessory dwelling units preempts the Aquifer Protection District regulations. It's something that I don't want to weigh in on officially, but I just would have to look more into it. But I do think that some of the protections, if not all of them in the Aquifer protection zoning, would still apply regardless of what the state has done. The ADUs.
Do they still know that before they get permits?
Yeah, it would be, if they review it, they compare it to the zoning ordinance, they do a review every time an application gets submitted.
Okay. Well, at this point, I think we, like I said, I think we need to look at this ordinance.
So I do have a question.
Yeah.
For Connie, because as we are just in an advisory capacity, it seemed like when you were speaking, you said if we advised and said, we think this will affect the water quality. Are you saying you would stand up in city council and say, I would not vote for this because it will affect the water quality?
Yeah, I would say that.
I'm just curious how that, because that's what you seem to be saying.
Yeah, I have no, but again, when I said this is just the beginning, yes, they've been working on this for a year, but we're just in the beginning conversation of everyone else now being kind of involved in this conversation. So I can't think of anybody on council who would say, you know what, this is going to mess up our water. Let's do it. Right. Like, I can't think of anyone. I'm saying the people who are currently on council, like, I couldn't imagine them advocating for that.
Well, it's happened before.
I'm sure it has happened before, but what I'm saying is like, if you all come to us and you say this is an issue or this is a problem, then
Okay.
I don't want my water to be.
Oh, Easthampton has great water. You have the best water of any of your towns, by the way. You have the least amount of stuff in it.
Yeah. Right.
Just really good.
We have the Municipal Leadership Academy going right now, and we were just at the water department last night, right? And so they gave a tour of the water department up on Hendrick Street, and we talked about the water and where it comes from, and showed photographs of how we get the water and the pump systems and all of that. And I think people are very invested, right, and committed to our water. And so lots of opportunity for people to participate in the conversation and to advise.
Okay, so I see Joy wants to say something.
Yeah, just one more thing. I do not want the newer generations to forget why we had to put in the water treatment plant, the pre-water treatment plant, the one on Hendrick Street, to treat the water that we were getting out of the aquifer.
Mhm.
And the reason why and how it all began and how it all came down to us, it just hones in the point that we can't be, like Michael said, we can't be reactive. And that, 25 years ago, we were looking at being proactive so that we could keep our water supply as pristine as we could. So I just wanted to hone in on that point, because that was painful to have to chlorinate our water. That was painful.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah. So, again, I apologize for coming in late. I don't know if it was mentioned earlier, like where this is at procedurally.
Mhm.
It was, okay. So yeah, it was not clear based upon the information that was put out to the public that there hasn't been a formal petition to amend the zoning ordinance yet.
So there's no formal petition. This is all just conjecture.
Yeah. So I do think maybe I was confused. I'm sure other people were confused as well too. That it hasn't, there is a formal process that has to be followed to amend the zoning ordinance, and that hasn't begun yet.
How long does that process take?
Months, several months. Yeah, there's public hearings involved. The city council has a public hearing. The planning board has a public hearing. There's notices that go out.
So we received the recommendations from and we were told, right, and that there are two paths that could be taken. It could go right to the zoning or the planning board, excuse me, or it could follow the path of city council. And so that's the way that we took it. And again, that was to protect in some ways the planning board from being involved in some of these things. And so us getting and doing most of the work of that and the conversations with the public. And then from there, once we got it into a good place that we felt comfortable, then we would send it to the planning boards so that they could start that process. So, you know, it's meant to be a dialogue, and it's meant to have as much community input as possible, and then to get it to a place that's feeling positive and people feel like they've been heard, and then we can give it to the planning board so that they can delve in and do their particular work, right? With the planning department.
Or it doesn't go there if city council thinks it will impair our water.
Yeah, or everyone is ignored like we always are.
Pretty much. Well, I don't know, like, that's the process. So it's going to go to the planning board. It's not going
You're
to.
saying it goes after, it's going after city council.
No. It goes from the ordinance subcommittee to the planning board.
So no legislative action can be taken on it until a formal petition is filed with the city clerk, to the city council. And there's a legislative process that is followed. And it just hasn't entered there yet. This is still informal, more or less, at this stage. If somebody were to submit a petition, there's certain officials, 10 registered voters, and so like there's various ways that you can do that. If that were to be submitted to the city clerk, it has to go through the process. So it will have to go to the planning board eventually if it gets submitted. But it's not there yet.
And that hearing for tonight is definitely not happening.
It's happening. So
Okay.
it was submitted, but the clerk was not there. It was confusion. So I am in process right now of rescheduling that.
So I'm concerned about the timeline of these meetings and cause there's an urgency with this problem. They're building these gigantic multi-unit housing projects in town. I think there's
Separate issue.
It's a separate issue.
It's a separate issue.
It's a separate
important
issue, but
it's a separate
it's
issue.
affecting
Yes.
this issue. And what would the timeline of your procedure be?
So there are certain windows that decisions and actions have to be taken within based on state law. But it's all triggered by the submission of that formal petition, which hasn't happened yet. So it's hard to say, but typically a zoning ordinance amendment will take months. And something of this magnitude would take much longer, I would assume.
I believe I've seen proposals submitted by private entities.
Do you have to have at least 10 registered voters that sign on to the petition? If it's not sponsored by the planning board,
But it could
the
come from
mayor
city
or the
council.
city council, correct?
Right. So this was sponsored by city council.
It hasn't happened yet. It's not conforming.
I checked with,
proposed.
I was talking with Barbara this morning, and the like actual petition, the formal paperwork, everything to initiate a vote on it hasn't occurred
Okay.
yet.
Okay,
Very good.
I'm going to close the public speak part of this, so we can move along. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a what's good for you.
It's 413-887.
Rachel's good.
No, well, you're not, because we're not doing
I think we should leave the document.
So you tell me. Yeah, no.
I think we should
understand that they submitted.
at least, I think, first week in March, maybe.
That's why I need to
That's
talk
next
to
week.
Barbara.
So you're right, Mike.
See you.
Yes.
Yeah,
Both of us are right in town anyways. What time you want to be?
11 a.m.
11 a.m.
Is that acceptable?
Yeah, maybe.
it's retirement, it's not.
I am moving 2 days after that.
Oh,
Ooh,
It's the 12th and 11th.
Correct. We're looking at the 12th at 11 a.m.
And the documents available on the town webpage.
I know that if you ask Mike Tosnick for it, if you send him a
Yeah,
message,
I
he will
have a
direct
link
you
for it.
exactly.
Can you send me the,
I
send us the
can
link?
send you the document.
If it makes you all feel any better, we take these concerns very strongly. We're very interested in preserving the aquifer, so don't think that we're not. That is our only concern. Though I tell you glibly that we only can advise. I'm telling you the truth. I'd rather tell you the truth, but you don't know me. But I tend to actually root for the stuff and let people know why it's a problem. I may not be the scientific end, but I'm a good communicator.
well,
And I-
hopefully they'll
I'm
listen.
Listening,
because-
you are all very hurt, okay?
I just feel the impact from those developers coming in here, getting in their way. Like,
I hear
City
you.
council just lets them do whatever they want.
yeah,
I hear you. I hear all of it. I really get it. I saw Joy back there. Give me your fist. I have a lot of respect for Mike Tosnick. He's been doing this for a long time here. You don't feel like it doesn't fall on deaf ears in this room. And I'm hoping it doesn't fall on deaf ears, beyond this room.
Who knows where in Westfield do they want to put this battery storage?
There's a meeting tomorrow about
Yeah.
it, big meeting.
Okay.
I think there's gonna be people from Easthampton, Westfield and Southampton there.
At 6 p.m. at the new elementary school on Route 20. It's probably not even
What time?
6 p.m.
Southampton Road.
No,
That route, no, Route 20. When you go through Southampton and you're turning right, like at that near that gas station, going to Blandford. Is that Route 20?
yeah, heading towards Blandford.
And it's on the right, the new
Oh,
elementary.
okay, yeah.
school,
Edge-
Way, way down there.
Okay.
Westfield.
I know where it
We
is.
were in Westfield.
There's a big solar.
I know where it is.
Yeah, it's by the huge solar farm.
Tomorrow.
So your question, is it supposed to go by the really big solar farm on Route 10?
Over plus where additional used to be.
By the airport, yeah.
Those batteries have a horrific, chance of creating a horrific fires.
Was it 40 tractor trailer sized batteries?
Yeah. I think it's 4, but.
No, I think it was
We
around
can
that.
talk on this map, but
Oh, yeah, let me
this
see
is
the
the
map.
state,
We lost.
or if you go, just scroll
Oh,
up.
it's on-
What is done there? That's the state application.
How do they keep them cool?
Go look and see what he's looking at.
Let's see it, the map trend. If you read it.
Yeah, but the maintenance, we need to understand the maintenance and prevention. Good question.
There's proposing, I think about 260 of the batteries. They're the size of tractor trailer trucks and they weigh 80,000 pounds.
60?
Did someone take our sign-in sheet or do we have that?
Oh, you were the
No, we had it. I had it.
260?
I was the last person to.
Oh, it was 100, I
Back to me.
Wow.
Great. Then I can have everyone's name. Thank you so much.
All right.
So this is a active battery storage system for the solar, whatever. Whose phone do I have?
It's at
I'll only walk away with it.
it's at a cost of about 2 billion. And that does not include the land and the hookup. And the state legislature did not say who pays for it. And this is the first one. To meet the new laws, there has to be hundreds of these throughout the state. Wow. But there's a deadline for a certain amount of megawatt development by, I think, June 25th. So there's pressure to get these done.
I do not believe the
Thank you.
plan had the protective stuff in it.
Do we have anything else?
I think we have something to think about.
Well, and I haven't got your message yet, but that's
Well,
maybe
I'll make sure.
that you've said it. I
Well,
hope.
let me look. Getting sidetracked.
Be getting, very good.
There's no reception down here.
So you can get on the the Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
It's just City Hall Public Wi-Fi and the password is stay in school, all one word.
Yeah, I remember that.
Mine goes on automatic.
Yeah, mine is too.
Yeah, that's my new phone. That's probably.
Yep.
Wow.
I'll need to do
There's
that.
all guys with new.
I don't
phones.
want it either.
All right, so we've got a meeting. We're gonna look at this. I wanted to report that I have taken my certification course on whatever it was I was supposed to, the state course. Did I take in yours?
I know. Oh, okay. So you did to be on a public committee, on a public body
Yeah.
for the Roberts Rules of Order for the public meeting.
Well, no, it's for the conflict
Oh,
of
the
interest.
conflict of interest. Yes.
Have you done that?
Yes.
I've done plenty of times.
Well, I know you have to do it every year.
Yeah. I'm surprised because I don't get notifications on any of. Did
No
you?
one cares about it.
I was getting 2 notifications a
It
day.
probably goes to my old email address, which I don't have anymore. Yeah.
Okay. I,
11 a.m., right? Okay. So next meeting would be March 12th at 11 a.m.
correct.
11 a.m.?
Yes.
11 a.m.
On the 12th.
Yes.
And I think what I will do, my assignment will be to prepare a map showing the recharge area.
So you're gonna make a map. Tasks. Very good. Does anyone want to
I may
attend
make a
the
mistake, but that's
the housing committee? It doesn't seem like we need to. It seems like this proposal hasn't even been
Right.
actually formally
mean,
submitted by process.
Found it right. Like I said, that meeting got canceled anyway, since the ordinance subcommittee, which I'll probably be going to for other things, so probably just happen to stumble across it anyways.
okay.
Okay.
Do we need any other maps?
Don't think so.
Did we ever put our stuff in the filing cabinet?
No.
Jeff bag has come and gone, but the filing cabinet remains and it's ours if we label it. We can take one of the empty filing cabinets.
Well, I do have,
Right, you want to get your stuff out of Smith.
I want to get my stuff out of Smith, but that filing cabinet won't do. I need like 3 of them.
So any ones that's
And now that
empty,
Patty's not here, because I stole a lot of them.
I think we
Pioneer
can steal
Valley.
those 3 if we ask nicely. There's nothing labeled on them. If we just label them and take them over.
Yeah, they're empty.
I will start moving my
Yeah, let's label them.
boxes.
Label them.
So did you say your next meeting was the 12th?
The 12th,
At
March
11
12th
a.m.
at 11 a.m.
Great. I was so excited to see this on the agenda because we watch the city meetings schedule a lot and I've not seen this in the,
This is our first meeting in a year, but Mike saw the development and so he made us have
Thank
this
you.
meeting before tonight's meeting.
thank you.
I'm glad you guys are here.
Yeah.
So,
We attend a lot of the city meetings because of the non-compliance. They canceled tonight's meeting because I called them on the,
Excellent. I just barely got this meeting in.
Yeah,
For the
thank you.
agenda.
They just schedule stuff.
You guys need any help with anything? Anybody do?
Motion to.
You want to
adjourn.
join the committee?
so move.
I need a
It
second.
sounds like you actually.
You should.
Maybe. So let's call the meeting at 4 PM. Let's see what time is
Then we're
it.
gonna end the recording.
4:03.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.